Welcome to the RPG Rundown, Episode 1. This is our pilot episode, and we are so excited to be here. My name is Seth, also known as WhiteFoxSG.
And I am Jeff, also known as DrHeals.
And like I said, we are so happy to be here in this inaugural episode of a tabletop RPG podcast. Jeff and I have been playing together. We've been fans of the genre for multiple years now. And we just thought, hey, we should start a podcast and just talk about it. Also, just as an excuse for us to just talk about these things more often together. But we will be exploring on this podcast the growing number of tabletop RPG systems, third-party modules, community game aids and accessories, as well as we'll be discussing recent news in the TTRPG space, and then just talking about our own experiences and current games or hobby projects, if you will. So that's kind of what we're going to cover. We're not going to be super groundbreaking with the news. We're going to cover things that we find interesting or maybe that the community suggests to us as we continue on into the podcast. But first of all, so that you all know how we got into into tabletop RPGs and a little bit about our history, we're just going to tell you that. So I'm going to go first because if you are in either of our communities, you know that I introduced Jeff to the world of tabletop RPGs.
He did, yeah.
And so
he's guilty for that.
I am guilty for that, and that's okay. That's okay. I am happy to be guilty of that because you have done some awesome things with it, and we're going to get to that later. But my first experience with an RPG of any kind was actually in the 90s as a 10-year-old, and it was with MechWarrior, the RPG. Okay, it was the second edition, and I never played it. We literally had the book so that we could create mech warriors or pilots for our mechs in the Battletech universe, which was our tabletop miniature war game that we had. And so we just had it because it had all the cool things on how to create a character, and so we just created our characters, and then we just played kind of RPG light in the miniatures war game. We didn't do any of the official tabletop stuff. We didn't have special rolls or die outside of that. We had very little RP, but that was my first experience with any kind of RPG book. Somewhere after there, I remember my cousin having the Star Wars D6 roleplay box, like the intro box. And I think I read through it a couple times. Didn't really get to play it much then. And then I really wouldn't touch anything until I got to my late 20s. Was married and got invited by a friend to play D&D. And it was funny. We started with 3.5 actually, because D&D 4... 4th edition was about to come out, but it wasn't out yet. And so I think we played 2 sessions with 3.5, and then we switched to 4th edition because it came out. Played a campaign, lasted probably 6 sessions, and then kind of stopped playing D&D for a while, and picked up the Star Wars Fantasy Flight Genesis system.
Nice. But before you move on, though, I do want to ask, what was your thoughts of 4E? Because I know Matt Colville is a huge fan of 4E.
Yeah. So 4E,
so I'd be curious to know.
Absolutely. And this is open discussion here by all means. 4E was fun. It was very combat focused. It was almost like they kind of went we have video games, and right now the biggest one that everyone knows about is Baldur's Gate 3. Fantastic game, but it is based off the D20 system. And Baldur's Gate 3 is based off of 5th edition rules. But, you know, with 4th edition, they kind of tried to take some of those video game mechanics, I think, and incorporate them in the tabletop version. I was not an expert by any means, but there was... so the differences that you would be familiar with 5e is that instead of having spell slots of different levels, you had spells, but they were cantrips or at will spells, meaning you could cast them as many times as you want.
Right.
But they were called at will instead of cantrips. Then you had some that were you could use like once or twice per encounter. And so they would have a limit on how many times per encounter you could use them. And then there were there was some that were like once per short rest maybe, or long rest. And then there were some that were daily. And so, usually those were like your big spells.
Yeah, big ones.
You only got to use them one a day.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, it focused a lot more on combat. There was a lot of metagaming. I was still new to it. We had other people that were new to it. We had someone that was like, he tried to be everything that was awesome that he could think of. So it was like, I'm a, ranger, rogue, ninja, assassin, spec ops.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He kept using the word spec ops, and we're like, this is fantasy.
Yeah.
And so we're like,
okay, nice.
Yeah. And this was like, it was like he didn't know what he was going to play, and I had said I was going to be one thing, and then he basically tried to do the exact same thing, but also add in like all the other cool things. And I was like,
oh yeah,
like, okay. Yeah.
There's one of those at every table. That's just
there is goes. Absolutely, and that's okay. But yeah, so that, like I said, it was fun. But other than that one campaign in 4E, we didn't really I didn't play it again. I played another one that was like 1 or 2 sessions, but that was it. And then for a long and basically I kind of stopped because the Star Wars Fantasy Flight role-playing game, which is their Genesis system, came out about that time, and I was super excited about that. So played that for a long time, bought all the core books across multiple years. I actually did some videos for some friends of mine that have a Star Wars podcast, and like did some DMing for them, and did some stuff here locally, and just loved that whole system. Eventually,
now, is that the same system that we played? It was probably about a year ago now. But you ran that one shot in. Okay, yes,
yeah,
I remember.
So that's the same system we ran the one shot. It has the narrative dice, which have custom symbols.
Those are cool. That was really cool.
And so I love that because the system is very narrative focused, and I'm not going to go into too much because that actually ties into our main topic today. But love that system. And so I was heavy into that. Okay. Then came back to D&D when 5th edition came out. Had some other people invite me to come back and play. And along with that, I just started really getting excited about different kinds of RPGs and started looking around. I ended up backing on Kickstarter Tales from the Loop. It was the first one I backed. And I backed it, and this is what was funny. Tales from the Loop was like perfectly timed. The Kickstarter launched, okay, and it was, or actually first there was an art book that came out from the guy who did all the art. And then they were like, hey, we're going to do a Kickstarter. And while that Kickstarter was about to launch, or right after it launched, guess what show became a #1 hit? Stranger Things.
Oh, yes.
It literally launched on Netflix like the same time that the Kickstarter was going on for this. And so it became hugely popular, and it was fantastic. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Also, that same company put out another one a couple of years later called Forbidden Lands, which was old school fantasy kind of RPG, very sandboxy, and so I liked that. And so yeah, after like since then, I have backed multiple RPGs and
Hmm.
not played them yet. And I have bought books for them. I have downloaded, you know, quick start guides and stuff like that. And then just
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun since then. But 3 years ago, approximately, uh, I'm hanging out in DrHeals chat on Twitch, and we were
Yeah.
talking up a storm about something, and D&D came up, and he mentioned he'd
Hmm.
never been able to play, and we had conversations before. Jeff and I had already had our the beginnings of our friendship started. He
Oh yeah.
did some logos for me and some other people that I had been grouped up with at the time, and so I was like, hey, well, I could totally DM a one shot for you if you
Hmm.
want to play. If because you've never played. And he's like, yes, absolutely, let's do it. He said, I've got a buddy who wants to do it. And then I said, okay, I'll see if I can get a few people that I know who, are veterans who can come in and they can play with us. It was Austin LCG
Hmm.
for anyone who might know him. And he brought two people with him. And so we had a full party of 5.
Yep.
And we played the first session. We started with a pre-written module out of Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, which was a Critical Role resource book,
Hmm.
and we all loved it so much. Everyone was like, "So we're gonna do this every week, right?" And that was
Yeah.
what was
Absolutely.
like. I was thinking we're gonna maybe do a couple of sessions, and but no, it
Hmm.
was like we need to secure all of the social media. We need to create
Hmm.
channels. We need to we're gonna do this every week, and we're gonna stream it every week. And so
Yep.
it blew
That's
up.
something with us. We don't do anything small, guys.
We
If
don't.
we're gonna do it,
We
we're
don't.
gonna go big with it. Yeah.
And it doesn't help when you've got Jeff, who is very creative. Myself, I'm a creative person. Austin was a creative person. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
he's like a major videographer.
Hmm.
And I've got to tell you some cool stuff that he's doing later too, because
Yeah.
it's mind blowing. Like,
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
yeah, like Star Wars level stuff. Not
Oh,
Star
well.
Wars, but like there's a
Yeah.
relation there, and you'll be like, okay, that's amazing. But
Okay. Cool. Yeah. For
he's doing
sure.
some cool stuff. But yeah, we played through a campaign. We got through a year with the same party. After a year, Austin had to drop out because of changing of jobs.
Hmm.
Jeff dropped out because of life changes with his
Hmm.
stuff. You were there for like a year and a half, though. It was like, well, no, a
It
few more
was. It was
months
like
at
a year and a
least.
half. Yeah. And if
Um,
anyone knows me online, I'm a very late night streamer. 11
Absolutely.
p.m. to 2 a.m. is my central time is my time, and our games, of course, they have lives and they like sleep more than they like coffee, I guess. I don't know, but yeah. So I end up having like I could not make the like 9 o'clocks, and so
It's
I
too
do
early
miss it.
for
I'm
you.
hoping to come back for like a guest role at some point in your new
Hey,
campaign.
dude, you should.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
it's
definitely
getting
want to. Yeah.
it's getting exciting. Let me just put that. Austin's back too, if you didn't know.
I know. I've been seeing that. Like, I'm
He
still in the
is
Discord,
he
so I
is
see
like
all the stuff you guys are talking about.
fully
Yeah,
back. He is like fully back. He
that's
was like,
amazing.
I want to come back, and I was like, yes, absolutely. So things are
That's
going
awesome.
great. We have a whole new cast besides him, which is even
Right.
more fun.
That's awesome.
But that was Jeff's introduction. So go ahead and give your version or your
Yeah.
experience now in the tabletop, and include all of your extracurricular hobbies on the side that coincide with it as well.
Okay. All right. I'll do my best. So, I'm far less experienced than Seth is. Obviously, he's the one who introduced me to it just a couple of years ago. But as you were talking, I actually, I think that I have a somewhat RPG related introduction that happened way earlier in life that I didn't really think about.
Ooh, I'm excited
Whenever
to
I
hear
was
it.
in like, yeah, when I was in like fourth, maybe fifth grade, I had a friend, and I always hung out with. I don't know. Like, I was an athlete. I love playing sports, but then I really got along better with like the nerdy guys. And so like I hung out and we played games and stuff. And now that we're talking about it, my buddy was an amazing artist, and he drew up characters for all of us. And mine in particular was what's the like reptilian species from Skyrim? Uh,
I have no idea.
Eric, I don't know. Anyway, it was like whatever that was. And like as you were telling your story about starting back with BattleTech and stuff, I'm like, we did something pretty similar. Like we had drawn up characters with like crazy fantasy names and like we RP'd those characters and stuff. I had no idea back then. But I would say that's probably my introduction to the RP genre anyway. And so yeah, then my first real introduction was actually playing Dungeons and Dragons, right, with you whenever and I remember like starting out, and this is probably how most people start, but starting out like it's a video game, and I'm like, okay, because I'm wanting to play a cleric because DrHeals, I like to play the healer, I like the support roles.
It's on brand.
And yeah, it's on brand. And so I'm like playing a cleric, and I'm like, but can I use a bow? And you're like, no, you can use anything. Are you proficient? And I'm like, no, can I shoot a bow, dude? But that's one of the things I had to get through is like in D&D, you can do anything. The question
Absolutely.
is how good at it are you going to be? And so it took me a little while to figure that out. But I mean, we played like 2 or 3 sessions, and I remember just being stupid hooked. And then Seth made the mistake of missing a day and giving me the opportunity to DM for the first time.
Yeah.
And I DM'd a one shot. And it went absolutely horrible because everything I had written went out the window when the 2 people I was DMing for both played rogues, and one was an assassin and one was a thief, and I just assumed they'd be good guys. I was mistaken. And so, but yeah, as soon as I started DMing, like I started kind of doing something on the side. We ended up starting up an in-person campaign. After church, we started up a campaign, and so I ran that campaign while playing in Hearth and Hammer. And yeah, so I'm also one of those people, like when I get into something, like I go kind of overkill, like hyper focus on it. And so like I ended up DMing an in-person campaign, DMing a campaign on my own channel, and then playing in Hearth and Hammer until eventually my scheduling got all messed up, and I had to step back out of Hearth and Hammer. And I've done like kind of the side stuff you're talking about over on my channel. I've done a variety of things. I have my own world that we play in. The world is Maradonia, and it has its own kind of fantasy, but ties to like the early American frontiers, how I kind of picture it. And so over there, I ran a campaign for a long time called Crosshaven, which was a open campaign. And so each week, 5 different adventurers from the town of Crosshaven would answer a quest on the board, and they would go out to do it. And all the while, there's like continuous developing stories and bad guys that are gaining leverage. And so it was really cool. And we just recently stepped back from that. And I'm not gonna go too far because I know we're going to talk about our own adventures later on. But I'm all that to say, like once I got into D&D, like I was absolutely hooked.
Well, that's not even to mention your deep dive into custom dice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So when we started,
which are
fantastic,
fantastic, by the way, and I still don't have any.
You don't have any dice yet? Oh, dude, I've got a few sets here around me. Like I'm just grabbing a handful of dice off my table. Like
we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, there's some dice. So I got into D&D, and I'm like, oh, dice are amazing.
Dice. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I don't think I have any that's actually painted near me.
That's okay.
Yes. So I got it. I turned into a dice goblin, but that wasn't nearly enough. So I started making my own custom resin dice. Created my whole brand. It's called Hillbilly Dice, HEAL. And it's still, I still make dice, not as frequently as I was. I've definitely got to get back into it. But yeah, started diving into making dice. And so like everyone at my table has a custom set, and a lot of my viewers, some of the people that play them online games, they have custom sets. Oh yeah. So that, like I think
we can also blame Reborn for the Dice Goblin thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Reborn, out of the amazing kindness of his heart, bought everyone in the party, including myself, dice pretty early. I want to say like within the first maybe 3 or 4 sessions that we had. And so, yeah, like we all got like full, like big sets of dice. They're fantastic.
There's some of mine. Those are my normal playing set.
Nice. Mine are just always here. Always ready. Always ready to be.
Always ready.
Always ready. And then I have others that are just on the table over here.
Yeah. Well, that's me. I have some over there. They need.
that I just pick up and I roll every once in a while, and it's 3d6 because I also am a big BattleTech fan, and BattleTech uses only d6.
Yeah,
which is a little sad because it's like, okay, fine,
Yeah.
but
I'll
like
go do
I will
math.
roll these, and I'm super excited sometimes when I get all three of them to roll 6 or all three of them
Right.
to roll 1 or something. It's just
Yeah. Oh
I'll just
man.
sit there and do that while I'm in a meeting or something for work. But
Oh, absolutely. No, I do the
uh,
same thing.
but yeah, so I mean, you got into that. It was funny
Hmm.
because all of your streams became D&D.
It was all D&D.
It was
I
all
was making
D&D.
dice on. I was prepping. I was running. Like it was everything was D&D. I'm like, this is everything I'm going to do now.
Yeah,
Now, if you know me at all, I'm also like super ADHD, and so like I get hyper focused for like a month or two, and
yeah,
then it's like, oh, what's that shiny thing? Like right now, I'm just super obsessed with chess. I don't know why. Like I've
that's
played chess my
okay.
entire life, but I'm just obsessed with it right now. But
That's
to
good.
continue my history, the only other games I've really played, and this is what kind of sparked at least my kind of real excitement for this show is I've only ever played two other TTRPGs, and I loved them. And like I really want to explore the world of TTRPGs. Like I love D&D, I love 5e. I enjoy that thoroughly, and I'm pretty sure my ongoing campaign is going to continue to be D&D. But I really want to play some of these others. And so the two that I played the Star Wars Genesis system with Seth. He ran a one shot, and then I did a charity one shot playing the Pokemon Tabletop United system, which was so fun. I really hope we continue that at some point
That's
because
awesome.
I had some cool Pokemon. But yeah, and so like I played those two, and then that really got me thinking, like, man, I want to try some of these new systems. But then, like with everything that went on with Wizards of the Coast here recently, and everyone is coming out with their new system, I'm like, there's a lot out there I want to test. There's a lot out there I want to play and learn more about. And yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, that was how this originated as a
mm-hmm,
discussion because we were like, we've got to be, we needed an excuse to talk about these other systems and to try
exactly, yeah,
them. And so we were like,
mm-hmm,
we can try these. And so our goal as part of this show is that we haven't quite worked out the logistics yet, but we are going
right,
to test out some of these systems. We're going
yes,
to run some one shots. It's going to be maybe monthly, bi-monthly,
mm-hmm.
hopefully at least.
At the least, I
Um,
would prefer monthly, but I know scheduling
yeah,
is
yeah.
the
So
arch
we'll
nemesis of
see what we can't
tabletops.
do for
Yeah,
sure. But we're going
mm-hmm,
to try to get through all that we can. But
mm-hmm.
this is also great because we have lots of content for the
Oh yeah,
foreseeable future
absolutely, yeah,
with this podcast. So now, as far as the podcast goes, we may actually put out more than one a month.
mm-hmm.
But the testing of new systems will only be on probably one of those a month.
Right, yeah.
So
Yep, that's what I'm thinking. If we could do one test a month, and then a follow up episode, maybe that week about our thoughts on it from like one of us would be the DM, one of us would be the player, and we could give perspective on both.
absolutely
Uh, and then thoughts on if it's a good long term system, or I don't know. We'll get some takeaways from it at that point. I
awesome.
know my list of ones I want to test is growing daily. It seems
I
like
know
so.
we have a
Yeah,
growing list. We both keep adding to it, but
yeah,
read off some of those, and then I'll read off some of them of
yeah.
the ones that we want to try. These are just things that we're excited about. That we know there's a ton
Mhm.
more out there. We know there's a ton more that have been out there for a long time, but these are the ones that we're kind of excited about at the moment. And there's almost 20 of them. But
Yeah. And I'm going to start with one that's not even on there
ooh,
because
nice.
I didn't add it. But I really want to play Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Oh,
Like
I actually was
yeah,
gonna add that too. Yeah.
yeah. So I was at Gen Con and I found a bunch of the Dungeon Crawl Classic books, and I remember seeing some stuff about it on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I should come back and grab those. Of course, I never made it back around to do that, but that's one that
Gen
I
Con.
really want. I want to try to play or DM a really nitty gritty D&D. And so, I mean, just going down our list here, got Tales of the Valiant, Dragonbane, Mech Warrior Destiny. I'm just reading from the top of the list to the bottom. And Seth added most of these, but I'm with him. I want to play pretty much all of these. I will say I've never played a Mech Warrior, though, so he's got to introduce me at some point.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. It may be an early one too, because
yeah.
yeah. You're not the only one who I've talked to about introducing to that world recently.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It'd be awesome. Then go ahead. You can read some. Most of these are
Yeah,
yours. Mine
so
come a little later
no,
on.
absolutely. So like besides those, we had the Avatar Legends RPG that was kickstarted and came out recently.
Mm-hmm.
Shadowrun, which is a cyberpunk style game, but with also some fantasy magic stuff mixed in. It's been around almost as long as BattleTech and Star Wars has, and really cool, really cool world. There's also some fantastic computer game RPGs based off that universe too. There's one called a Bag RPG, BAG, and it's actually by a Christian author. He came
Oh,
out
that's
with so that's his like kind of generic system, but he kickstarted a kind of like gritty sci-fi RPG, and so that's
Yeah.
still in production. It hasn't come out yet, so I'll have more on that later. But Pathfinder and Starfinder, they're always there. I'm always curious, but they are
Mm-hmm.
very heavy. So I'll
Right.
be like excited for a little bit, and then they get pushed down the list.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's Humblewood, which is
Yeah.
fun, cute animals. I'm excited about.
Yeah. Humblewood's really cool.
City of Mist is like a modern, detective noir kind of one.
Okay.
It's kind of cool. I actually backed it and just like at a base level a long time ago too. Take over there some.
Yeah. So Daggerheart, obviously, I will say just a little story here. At Gen Con, the only thing that I wanted to test play was Daggerheart, and I'm pretty sure it was booked up months in advance, and I had no idea.
Oh yeah,
I
I'm
didn't
pretty
know
sure
you
they
could
only
book them ahead
let
in
like
advance.
20 people try it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they
it
were
was
all
very
all
limited.
media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very limited. I tried to get in on the test plays. It did not happen for me, so I was very disappointed. Um, so yeah, Daggerheart. There's the Marvel Multiverse RPG. Yeah, old school essentials, Forbidden Lands. A lot of the ones that I really want to test are from particular content creators that I really like. So I
Agreed.
love Matt Colville, and so I don't even know if it has a name yet, but the MCDM RPG that they're coming out
Oh
with.
yeah,
It's going to be so good. Just Matt, what he does is incredible. But also the Dungeon Coach, if you've been following DC 20 RPG, is going
absolutely.
to be incredible. Like I've watched several of his videos talking about it. I am so excited for that to come out. Then a few others like kind of outside of the fantasy genre, I guess, is like Champions RPG. I love anything superhero related. I will say all the Marvel and DC's tainted that just a little bit. There's just a bit much out right now. But I love, like, I don't know. I would love to play like a nitty gritty superhero type of something. I don't know that. And Champions always looked really good.
It's
And
kind of your
then
generic superhero,
yeah, that's kind of what I like. Yeah,
as opposed to set in a world. So
yeah. So I want to test if you're listening, if you're watching some knowledge. It was a podcast series, but it was actually a book, and they just read basically the chapter in every episode. But it was called Worm. If anyone has read or listened to Worm, let me know, because it is still to this date the best superhero content I've ever read. I don't know why it has not been picked up and put in. It actually follows a super villain, as odd as that is, but still, it was so good. That's what I want to play. That world is what I want to play. Someone needs to get with that author and have him turned into a TTRPG.
I mean, yeah, I could go through countless books that I would love to see made into a TTRPG.
Oh
I
yeah.
just thought of another one that I literally have and have not tried yet. The Expanse TTRPG.
So I am watching The Expanse based on, I think,
Oh,
possibly
we'll talk
you and
later.
Ian and a few others from. Yeah, you were
Yes.
talking to me about it in chat, and I was like, all right, I got to check it out. As soon as I ended stream, I went and watched like 4 episodes and went to bed at somewhere around 4 or 5 a.m. Really messed up the next day, but
Oh,
it
for
is
sure.
it is a good show. Yeah, dude,
Yeah,
that would I
it's
didn't realize there
fantastic.
was a TRPG for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
There's also
yeah.
some really old, like there's an old sci-fi one called Traveler. And when I say old, I
Okay.
mean like it's been out like about as long as D&D. I know next to nothing about it, other than the
Okay.
fact that it was like one of the first, if not the first, sci-fi RPG.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a modern version, like a modern printing, and I happened to just see it in a new
Yeah.
game shop that I went to go visit recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, like
Hmm.
I would love to try this. So
Yeah.
there's that. There's also Lord of the Rings and Legend of the Five Rings, which are completely different, but they both have the word rings in them.
Okay.
Um, Lord of the Rings is obvious, and I'm pretty sure they
Mm-hmm.
just started a Kickstarter for an expansion on that one.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
Legend of the Five Rings is another one from Fantasy Flight, which is not Fantasy Flight anymore. Their RPGs are all under Edge Studio now. So, but yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, there's so many. There's so many. We have a lot of content that we can pick and choose from as we please. So,
Yes. I will say another one, just throw it on the list too. The
yeah.
Fallout RPG. Like, I'm a huge fan of the Fallout
Oh,
series, and I actually have a book for the Fallout RPG. I think it's just the character creator. Didn't realize that when I bought it. But
nice.
I
I
but
didn't
I
know they
do
had
have
one.
it.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. They actually. I mean, I have one of the books.
see,
I
this
guess I
is
probably need
why.
more to
This is why
actually
we'll.
be able to
You know what? I don't know. I know it exists. I know
play.
nothing about where to find it, but I'm pretty sure there's also a Transformers RPG.
Oh, that could be wild. Oh my gosh. But it
Yeah,
also, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're able to leave us a comment, if there's one we're missing and you'd love to see us check out, talk about, and maybe test play, leave it down below. I mean, we're constantly adding to our list. We probably need to put a
absolutely.
rankings out
In
there.
fact,
Like, I've been watching a lot of fantasy football, and rankings are a big thing. We should probably have
nice.
rankings to see what
I
we're actually going to
agree.
play.
I agree. We can vote on them for
Hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
Also, we are on Twitter. It's our only social handle
Oh
at the
yeah, yeah.
moment, but you should definitely check us out. And we've waited halfway through the episode to say it, but it
Promo
is
stuff. Yeah.
at the RPG Rundown on Twitter, on X.
Hmm.
You know,
On X. Yes,
on
X.
X. I've got to call it that. But yes, at the RPG Rundown, and you can find us there for now. That's the only way to contact us for now.
Hmm. Hmm.
We have some things in the works, so there won't be the YouTube won't be up yet, like immediately.
Yeah.
So the VOD for the right now is going to be what you see on DrHeals' Twitch channel, and then I'm
Very
not going
true.
to say anything on the recording yet, but it's going to be. We have some things planned. It's going to be excited, and
Yeah. Stuff
honestly, the
planned. Stuff
recording
coming.
has graphics already on it, but so
Hmm.
that's beside the
Yep.
point. We'll add that in later at the end as part of that.
Hmm.
But anyway, so yes, part of the goal is to play these systems, provide just feedback, just our experiences on it. We're not
Hmm.
experts, but we just like RPGs. I think both of us can agree there's something that bringing people together to collaborate on a story
Hmm.
is something special, and it's even more fun when you get to bring new people to it.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
And I think that's a kind of an interesting take we'll be able to have on these systems when we test play them too. Is like, neither of us are professional DMs. Neither of us do this full time, and we're going to be playing this with real individuals who are going to be learning the game. Probably a day before we play it, and so it'll
absolutely.
we'll be able to give a rating on, hey, how easy is this thing to pick up and actually play. So
Yeah, I'm looking
I
forward
think
to it.
I thought it'd probably be really fun.
Well, let's move into our next segment for now. That was a lot of introduction, who we are, what we're going to be doing, but we're also going to have some news and stuff. We're not going to go into a whole bunch of news today, but we are going to talk about an upcoming RPG that we're excited about.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about Daggerheart.
Of course.
And, it's supposed to come in 2024, so that's not very far
Hmm.
away. But there are some things that we can talk about. I have read many articles. I've got a few pictures to share. So if you're watching the VOD, watching the YouTube, or the video version of the podcast somewhere, be sure to check it out. And all of the I was not present to get these photos. Were from a comicbook.com article, because I swear those the people from comicbook.com were some of the only ones to be testing it. I feel like I've
Really?
hardly seen
Okay.
any other articles of people who are actually testing it. Everything else is just third-party people talking about
Hmm.
what they did. So
Right.
we're gonna
Yeah.
just follow in those footsteps. But why don't you? Let's switch over to our presentation,
Okay.
and I think why don't you go ahead and read it out there for us? What is Daggerheart there?
Yeah. So Daggerheart is a D12 based tabletop system from Darrington Press. They're the creators of Critical Role, Vox Machina, fantasy RPG designed for long-term campaign play, is what we've been told anyway. Designed for long-term campaign play and character progression. I don't know. I've been watching a ton of videos, read a lot of articles and stuff on it. It sounds amazing. Like it sounds like a great, to me, it sounds like a really good um, middle ground between like the story or narrative based like Genesis system and what we see in like D&D. And there does, I mean, it's even been said that it's kind of intended to be a little bit like gritty too, a little bit, more character deaths, like no saving throws. There's other ways to handle death and stuff like that from what we've heard, but it is supposed to be, kind of gritty and really narrative.
Yeah, death is supposed to be a lot more impactful.
Hmm.
There's a lot of really cool stuff from the interviews that they talked about with the creator
Right.
and lead writer, and I can't remember his name. It's not Matt and company,
Hmm.
who are the lead writers, but they are definitely helping create all this, and it's coming out of
Right.
Darrington Press, so they have a pretty big team.
Hmm.
But one of the big things about this is that it is taking a different approach. It's not just a D20 system. It is 2D12.
Indeed. Yes.
And D12s, I feel like in D&D they are like the least used of
Yeah.
all of the dice. Maybe besides the D100, but but for the most part, they're the least used. And so I like it, and we're going to talk about some
Mhm.
of more details about what it is.
Right.
Um, if you're
What's interesting
watching
about
the
I was going to say what's interesting about the 2D12 is they actually represent two different things too. And so like
absolutely,
you have a hope dice and a fear die, right? And then like you
yeah,
roll both, and like even if you roll really high, if fear beats hope, it might not go your way.
yeah, we're
Or
going to
if hope
talk
beats
about
fear.
those mechanics here in a second. But
Hmm.
just looking at the pictures, and like I said, if you're watching the VOD, these are from the comicbook.com article about it. They are so the article, and then I also took some screenshots from the video as well. They are uh, a lot further along than I thought. Like they
Hmm.
had some full promotional materials, like a box set even. And I love that it's like a box set because they have so many more pieces. They've incorporated cards into the
Right.
character sheets. They've incorporated
Yeah.
tokens. Um, we'll get to that in a second, but there's it's really cool, and I like how I feel like with some RPG systems, you've got like 3 pages for your character sheet, but you're really only ever looking at one. And I feel like
Yeah.
this one so
Very
far,
true.
it's like you need to be looking at all 3 of them.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, and we may come back to some of these images um, as we go further into it. But let's see. Um,
So these images you found, these are from the test play. Is that
so
correct?
these are from some of the test play. Yeah, it's so I actually screen capped them from one of the videos. It was
Okay.
still the comicbook.com article, but yeah, I was like, these are a little closer shots in the video
Hmm.
than the photos were.
Right.
So yeah, so we're gonna talk about this stuff here. So kind of like how does it compare, right? So how does it compare to D&D 5e, which coming from Critical Role is their primary game system.
Right.
And then also because a lot of people have seen the similarities. How does it compare to Genesis, which is the Fantasy Flight Star Wars system? Because those are the two that I have the most experience in. I was seeing a lot of similarities, more so with Star Wars. But yeah, we'll get into that. And then if there's anything else we think of, we'll talk about that too. But
yeah.
But yeah, so like again, looking at the images, they have cards, like a deck of cards that have all their abilities on it, like your kind of main abilities. And it's pretty awesome because all of the language for the spells or abilities are on those cards. And I know that in the interviews they talked about how they wanted to have that set up so that you don't have to open a book to look at the rules.
Yeah, which is, I mean, awesome. I love that. I mean, there's already third-party makers that do that for 5e. I mean,
absolutely.
I have decks of cards for a few different, Magic users and stuff for D&D.
Yeah.
And now I do wonder, like, do you think that this will have almost like a trading card aspect? Like, do you think there'll be like rarities or cards, or do you think it'll just be whenever they release something, it's a pack for that new release?
I think it'll be a pack. I think the initial box will be, the primary pack for it, and then I think like other source books that we get for like D&D and other games, we'll see a new box set as like an expansion, and it'll come with rules and a card pack. That's my thought anyway.
That's kind of my thought as well.
Part of it is because all these abilities too, not only like most of them are tied to different, I forget what they call them, but they're almost like different categories. And so they have these kind of symbols, almost like when you look at like the Pokemon trading card game and you've got like the fire symbol or, electric or whatever. Not saying that this is like that, but like where it's the elements, but like, there's a rogue ability in the image right now, and it has two different symbols on it. And, if it says Midnight and Grace, and I think the symbols correspond with Midnight and Grace. And so it's like your character may be able to select spells from either of those two categories, kind of thing, or abilities, maybe not spells, but and then also, so I don't know. I think it's gonna be cool.
Right, I do too. Yeah, and that's one thing. So I noticed there are different types of cards as well. Whereas you have that one that's a rogue card, but then you actually have just like ability cards, and that's where you have your ability cards. And so I wonder if when you purchase, like, I mean, obviously your starting pack will come with everything you need, but I don't know. It would be interesting if they did mix, trading card genre stuff in there too. But yeah,
I think
I don't know that they will.
Now that I'm looking at it,
yes, domains. That's the word I was looking for earlier.
And they do have a mechanic to exhaust the cards that is kind of built into the character sheet. So, I think kind of like Magic or Pokemon, you can like probably tap it or exhaust it and it'll use it. So, but yeah, there's other cards besides those. There's character cards. There's, it's, I don't know. It's a really cool idea to incorporate.
It's a cool take. I like the introduction of cards. I mean,
but I think that's also why I don't think they'll go with any kind of like blind pack collector stuff.
Sure. Okay.
I don't think there'll be any of that trading card game kind of mentality.
Yeah, that's what I guess that's what I was thinking of. Was, blind packs.
Yeah, I don't think they'll ever do that. And part of the reason is because then it becomes who can spend the most money to get all the cards. And then it's
true.
That loses some of the fun for it. So I think there are other card games, like Fantasy Flight, for example, had the living card game genre. And so it was kind of collectible, but you basically would just buy like the main box, and then you would buy an expansion set when they would release it, and they would release like 4 of them a year. And each one you would buy like the full set in the pack. And so it would be like a new set of like 30 extra cards.
Right.
And so they would release them. quarter one, you'd get the whatever set, and it would have 30 new cards to add to your collection, kind of thing.
Right.
So in that sense, yes, there's a little bit of collecting, but it's almost no different than if you were to buy a source book with new stuff in it.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need it, but if you want to add the new stuff to your game, you purchase it, which is smart for them. I mean, I have to imagine cards of this sort are cheaper than producing a whole new book. And then at that point, you have just ongoing monetization too.
And they can print small books to go along with them. I mean, they don't have to print full, 200-page source books or adventure modules. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see the direction they go with the physical products. So far, everyone has been super impressed with them, and the pictures that we're looking at, I totally agree.
Yeah, they look great.
But okay, so we talked about how it compared, but how does it compare to Genesis? And I kind of, if you're looking at the slides, I have something that says Genesis 2.0 question mark, because there are a ton of similarities with Genesis, but a lot of it feels a little more modern and refined. Okay. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're more the Genesis expert, so I'm going to let you unpack that.
Right. Absolutely. And so, so first of all, and obviously you were there at Gen Con too, so you can help compare from the Daggerheart side. But Daggerheart has 2d6, or excuse me, 2d12 as a primary, the Hope and the Fear die. And in Star Wars Fantasy Flight in Genesis, you had a dice pool. And the dice pool, you had positive and negative dice, but it was something where you had to build a dice pool. But it was still a similar pass-fail system. So in Genesis, you said, okay, my ability is... So in Genesis, you had ability dice. And so you would say, well, I am proficient in an ability, so I get 2 green D8s with custom symbols on them. And because I'm proficient, I'm going to get a yellow D12 that has some extra symbols on it. The yellow dice are the only ones that have critical success on them. The green dice don't. They just have success, fail, and then another mechanic called advantage.
Right.
And then you would, to create the dice pool, you say, well, this is a average difficulty for a check. So average was 2 difficulty dice, which are purple, and they're 8-sided. And so then you would put the 2, you'd put your 2 green and 1 yellow together and roll at the same time that you roll the 2 purple. And so that's your whole dice pool. And you roll all of them, and then you count how many success symbols you get, how many failure symbols you get, and, whatever the sum total is whether you pass or fail. But you could also have 3 successes as the sum total, and so then that unlocks certain things. Like some of your abilities might be, oh, well, I hit you with 3 successes. That means it's like a bleed shot or something,
Right.
And then there's other symbols called advantage, and it also works in the opposite direction. So if you get failure, then it could be something negative. And so it's very narrative. The dice help tell the story. Go ahead and talk to us though about like the 2D12 system and how, like, I know how similar it is, but like explain it, how it's the same but with less dice.
Yeah, so it, to me, it does seem similar because you have a hope and a fear dice, and which also from a dice making perspective sounds really exciting, just considering the different the contrast we have between those 2 dice. And so you have a hope and a fear dice, and you roll both of them, right? But say even though you get a high enough score, say the DC is a 15, and you roll an 18, right? You roll a 10 and an 8. If your hope is higher, then you have a positive outcome. However, if your fear is higher, if your fear was that 10, then you will have a negative outcome from that. And so,
but not just
you also
the outcome.
have that.
I mean, if you beat the DC, so which is kind of a 5e thing. If the DC is 14 and you roll a 15, but you succeed,
Yeah.
But you could,
Yeah.
like you said, you could succeed
Like a
with a negative effect,
with a negative effect. Yeah.
yeah, or if your hope dies more, then you succeed with with an even greater positive effect.
Yeah. Something to be noted too is the way that critical successes are done as well. Is that anytime you
Yes.
roll the 2 dice and the numbers match, so whether that's 2 1s or 2 12s, that is a crit, which is actually higher
Yes.
chances than in a D20 system, because it's
There
1 in
is.
12 versus 1 in 20.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it's absolutely. And so I know that the creator talked about really liking the bell curve on
mhm.
having 2 dice to roll instead of 1.
Yeah.
And I agree.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like that as well. And also, he didn't talk about critical failure.
I
So
haven't seen anything about critical
I don't
failure
know if
yet.
that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I think that you can. I think because every roll has a chance to have a negative
Yeah.
effect, even if you succeed, I think that's fine. I think that balances it out.
So
Because
here's my question to you, as someone
yeah,
who's ran something like this as the DM. Like, what does this look like in your thinking as like, okay, how can you make someone succeed with a consequence? Like, or
absolutely,
like, how does
great
that come
question.
into your narration?
So here's how Fantasy Flight suggests to do it, and also how I ran it. But
Mhm.
basically, the dice results are supposed to help tell the narrative. Okay, it's supposed to be a helping mechanic to players and DM alike who have
Mhm.
not maybe don't have quite the creative RP mentality. But so if you in both systems, if you succeed but you have a negative effect, so if you succeed with fear in Daggerheart, or if you succeed with threat, which is the counterpart in Genesis, then what with the negative consequence, that's something the DM would apply. So it would be
Right.
something like this. It would be like you swing your sword and you strike, hitting your target, but then it continues through and it gets stuck in the wooden pillar of the tavern. Okay,
Okay.
meaning that you have disadvantage trying to get your sword out and make an attack. And so in Genesis, threat is applied with a black d6. And so then
Mhm.
what that would be is I would say, okay, well, you on your next attack roll, you have to subtract, you have to roll in your dice pool a black d6 along with whatever the normal check is. So it would
Okay.
basically add more of a chance for you to roll negatively. But not a lot
So
because
it's
half of the d6 was blanks. So it'd be
mhm.
like you'd have like
Oh, okay.
3 out of 6 chance, or to be to get a little bit extra of the negative
Mhm.
consequences. In Daggerheart, I believe you basically that gives you fear can give you disadvantage,
Mhm.
and so then it would be like, well, now you have to subtract a d6 from your roll.
Yeah. So it's subtract a d6.
So rather than
Uh,
take two
yeah.
d20s and take the lower number, which can be very punishing
Mhm.
because there's such a larger range of numbers to get, now you're just subtracting a d6, and I think that's
Right.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And so then this,
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, so in the,
Because
that's the
yeah.
negative consequence.
Mhm.
But then the opposite is also true. So you could fail a roll, but have a positive consequence. And so in Genesis, it would be something. Well, as far as the narrative would go, what I would do is then I leave the positive element up to the player, because in Genesis it's kind of instructed to do that. They
Mhm.
get to control what happens with their positive element. And in Genesis, there's a list of things that that they have a list of things that you can do as suggestions, and then the rest is up to you. But it's nice because they do guide you. But it would be something like this. It would be something like, I failed, but I had an advantage, which is the equivalent to hope in
Right.
Daggerheart. And so it would mean that you it would be something like, you swing your sword and you missed the target, but you scraped the ground, and maybe this is what the player would say, like, I scraped the ground with my sword as I missed in the upswing, and it pushed sand into the eyes of the enemy. So now on their next attack, so that's the thing, is that it could be one of two things. So, and again, in Genesis, it would be something like the player has the choice to either give a disadvantage to the DM,
right,
or an advantage to the next person, the next player.
Right. Okay.
So then what you could do is be like, well, I knock sand into their eyes, and so my companion who is attacking next, they get advantage. So what that would translate to is it would give them a blue D6 advantage dice with 3 out of 6 chances to gain an extra positive. Similarly, if someone has advantage in Daggerheart, you add a D6 to the roll, as opposed to just rolling like an extra D12 or something.
Yeah. And the cool thing too is in Daggerheart, you're going to get what's called hope points. And you can store up to 5 hope points is where you start. And
it's
you
another
can actually
similarity
use
that I didn't put on the list, but yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you can use 2 hope points to give yourself advantage on a roll, or you can use 1 hope point to give an ally advantage. I like how it's kind of encouraging you to help and be like a team player. I thought it was kind of cool.
And that's exactly how the advantage and threat points work in Genesis, because you are rolling a big dice pool. Generally, of at least usually it's at least 4 to 6 dice that you are rolling.
Right.
And so you could end up with 1 success, but 3 threat. And because there's 3 threat, those are the same thing as like the fear points, essentially.
Right.
Or it would be, and so there's a list of things, like you said, or the opposite. You could fail. You could have 1 failure, but you could have 3 hope or 3 advantage, which is again the equivalent in Genesis. And so if you have 3 advantage, then you could spend 2 of those on giving yourself advantage the next time, and the last one of the 3 on giving your friend advantage. So you could spend all of those points as you get them. Also, in a similar instance, it kind of like in Genesis, there's another thing called force points, and those are like heavier swings those are more like luck. And that's something that Daggerheart has. Daggerheart has a luck system instead of inspiration. But I think they kind of also talk about it like inspiration. But
right. Okay. Very interesting.
But yeah, what are some other things on the list there?
So I thought it was kind of interesting that armor breaks. I don't know if that was a thing in Genesis or not, but armor reduces the amount of damage that an attack would deal to the character. But then after the armor's been used for like a specific number of times, it's damaged and can no longer function. Like
without being repaired.
That to me is a cool mechanic.
Is another mechanic.
It's something I actually homebrewed into my games.
Nice.
Is like the upgrade of armor and the wearing down and stuff of armor like that. I don't know. I like that. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, in Genesis, armor is something that reduces the damage as opposed to giving you the DC or the AC.
Right.
It reduces the damage, and in Star Wars, it's called soak.
Mm-hmm.
And then also similarly, you've got a smaller amount of hit points. Damage is calculated a little different, and then there's also strain, which is like kind of your mental fortitude.
Yeah.
And so though
they call it stress.
Yeah. And so Genesis and Daggerheart do it just a little bit differently.
Okay.
But it's also very similar. And so so that's again that kind of, as opposed to having just a massive pool of hit points as you level up, this just changes some of that as you go. And so I think it's a fun mechanic for armor and stuff like that. So
yeah, I like that. And so kind of getting into the way that attacks and damage and stuff's dealt, at least from what I read, it said characters start with 6 hit points. I'm gonna have to assume that one of your abilities will increase that. Now the stats in Daggerheart are obviously different than D&D, but very similar as well. But it's strength, agility, precision, presence, intuition, and knowledge.
Yeah, and they don't give you a ability score and then ability
Mhm.
modifiers in Daggerheart.
Yeah, I
It's
actually like
just
that too. That
modifiers.
they've simplified that a whole lot.
Yeah. Well, and in D&D, that's a callback to how you rolled your
Mhm.
ability scores. You rolled, specific dice to get those ability scores. So,
Right.
but yeah, that's one thing that's pretty awesome. Another thing that I thought was pretty fantastic, and this is where Genesis and Daggerheart differ a little bit, is that
Okay.
Genesis has it can get a little clunky in combat because you end up
Okay.
rolling so many dice. Now they have an app, an official app for dice rolling, which is very handy. But if you're at a table and you're rolling dice, you could be like, well, I have proficiency and I've boosted my skills because I've gained a few levels, and so I'm rolling 3 green ability dice, 2 yellow proficiency dice, and then there's like, it's a hard shot, so that's like 3 purple difficulty die, and then there's like another a red d12, which is like even more negative. And then we've been in combat for a while, so I've got a blue die that's from advantage from somebody else. And then, and so then you're up to like 10 dice that you're rolling for an attack.
Goodness, yeah.
And so it takes a while for people to calculate that up.
I was gonna say, I do remember that being confusing when we played the one shot. So, is what dice roll and stuff.
And it absolutely does make sense. Like, it really does. But again, it's a little clunky in that it takes time to build your dice pool. I feel like if you were playing this digitally, it would be a breeze because it would be calculated like if you were playing it in some other system.
Right.
But Daggerheart is definitely a refined version of this because it's just the 2d12.
Yeah.
And then you add your modifiers. Now, another cool thing too is that they have introduced tokens to help you count your modifier. So to have a visual representation, you don't have to use this. In one of the interviews, he said some of the veterans were like, well, I won't use it. I'll just remember to add my modifier. But all the new players were like, oh, I'm going to use it. And then everyone started using it. Because basically, say you have a +3 in wisdom, okay? And you have to roll a wisdom ability check. Well, you would roll your 2d12, and then you would add 3 tokens for wisdom. And then you basically just, shake them all in your hand and roll it into the dice tray. And those tokens don't have anything else on them. They don't have numbers on them or anything. You don't have to, like, there's no random element to the tokens. It's really just to help you very quickly see the 2 numbers on the D12s and then immediately count 1, 2, 3 because there's 3 tokens. And so, your party members and the DM, they may not know what your ability modifier is. So the fact that you just rolled 3 tokens means that they now know you had an ability modifier of 3.
Right.
And so they can very quickly also determine you rolled a 15 plus 3. That's
kind of nice, yeah.
And so then they were like, and then you can like bring your own tokens. You can have custom, if I'm going to be a druid, I'm going to have like leaves or feathers or something. I'm gonna.
So what you're saying is I need new molds. I got you.
Yeah,
okay.
It's gonna create a whole nother,
a whole other DOS system I got to start making. Yep.
Just tokens.
Yep.
Just tokens.
Just tokens.
So yeah,
all D12s and tokens.
Exactly. So, it's just a really cool way, even though it requires some extra pieces, but you could use literally anything for them. To to visually make it easier to see a roll result.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a cool concept. I like that a
So
lot.
I think it speeds up combat in
Yeah.
that instance. So that plus the fact that it's only ever 2d6, or excuse me, 2d12,
2d12. Yeah.
and then maybe a d6 that you subtract
Mm-hmm.
or, add.
Yeah. So
So it's going
something
to make
that's
it fast.
interesting too is in the combats is you actually have like a damage threshold. So there's three of them. So attacks and spells can only do 1, 2, or 3 points of damage based on whatever the enemy rolls, or I guess you roll as your damage dice. So if you break the minor
Well,
threshold,
that's
go ahead.
I mean, I think that's how much health you can lose, 1, 2, or 3. But the
Right.
damage could be more. So you could take 9 points of damage, but depending on where your threshold is if you only lose 1, 2, or 3
Right.
points.
The hit points. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
I
So
know it's going to
depending
be a
like
little. We're going to have the rules in
yeah,
front of us for sure before we figure
that's
that
it.
out.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, what I wrote down here is so they use the example of your minor threshold could be 4, your major threshold is 9, and your severe is 14. And so if the damage dice rolls a 15, you lose 3 hit points. If the damage
yes,
dice rolls 3, for instance, you don't lose any hit points, but you do take 1 point of stress. And so
yes,
you store up stress, and so even though you didn't lose any hit points for that hit, you actually store up stress. And so once you get to 5 points of stress, every hit after that will do at least 1 point of damage, even if it doesn't break a threshold.
but I think that
Uh,
threshold is even dependent upon how much armor you have.
right, and that's kind of what I'm
So
assuming.
you
What
could,
what I was reading
yeah,
didn't say where the threshold came from,
yeah.
but it was just using that as an example.
Again, there's a
Yeah,
lot we're going to have to figure out. But so
right.
if your
There's a lot
threshold,
that's
like
not
you
clear
said, if
yet.
your threshold is 4 and you
Hmm.
take 3 points of damage, but you're a sorcerer and your armor only mitigates 2 points of damage, you know,
Right.
sure. Or it's one of those things where like you said, maybe you have armor that mitigates 3 points of damage and your first threshold is 4, but you take
Hmm.
7 points of damage from an attack. Well, your armor reduces it to be a first threshold, which then gives you the strains. Yeah, we're gonna have to
Right.
figure that out when
Well,
we
you will
have the
definitely have
rules.
to wait
But
till
it's
that's actually out. But that
very
was kind of
cool
my
looking
understanding of it. And it
concept.
sounds, I don't know, interesting.
Yeah,
Less numbers you're dealing with.
yeah, and although
In
it's
the
also interesting in that your conversion comes at applying the damage as opposed to
mhm,
rolling the damage. Is
right,
almost what it sounds like.
yeah.
So
And I guess my curiosity comes is how does that scale, right? If you have a minor threshold that's 1 point, a major threshold that's 2, a severe threshold that's 3. Like, does that ever scale from 1, 2, and
he
3?
said
Or
if there is a video interview,
okay,
and he talks like the designer.
hmm
Let's see, I'm trying to think who it was with, but yeah, he talks about in the interview. He talks about the fact that it does scale.
okay,
So there's a way to increase that. So yeah, I think that's pretty awesome.
hmm
The kind of the last thing on this list are experiences, and this was just something cool from Daggerheart. Is
hmm
that according to your background or according to the experiences you have in game as you go, you can basically earn almost proficiency in something. So, like if you have an experience in, say, from your background, you were on a pirate ship for a while. Well, now, if you have to, you're on a ship somewhere and you have to climb the rigging, maybe you don't
right,
even have to roll for it. You just are able to do it because it's an experience that you have. Whereas if you didn't have that,
okay,
maybe you have to roll, kind of thing.
right,
So it kind of gives you that. In my limited understanding with what knowledge they've been able to give us with this preview, it was kind of made me think of like a ranger's favorite enemy. Where
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's a favorite enemy, I get advantage on it every time.
hmm
Or I know some classes have the ability to, I don't have to worry about rough terrain because I'm in a forest,
Right. Yeah.
stuff like that. And so I think that is kind of what they were going for.
That's
But
a cool
it's
concept.
cool because it's something that's just ongoing, and then it sticks with you as you keep going. So
Right.
So yeah, and they called it experience.
Okay.
Uh,
That sounds cool.
yeah, I don't know. Like, I think again, I have limited compared to some experience with tabletop RPG, like different tabletop RPG systems, but I have at least played 4 or 5 of them. And to me, like, this Daggerheart just sounded so much like Genesis from Fantasy Flight. Because it's narrative, but I think then it still has the ability to get crunchy in combat, which is fun for those of us who like to have the maps and the minis and stuff like that. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really excited for it. 2024 as a release date, who knows when that's going to be? Probably.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if it's earlier than summer of 2024.
Right. Which is
Q3.
which is cruel. It's just hard.
But they also, can kind of go with whatever pace they want because they're publishing it in-house. So, so yeah, it just kind of depends on logistics at that point, I feel like. But
right.
Anyway, I think, do you have anything else you want to talk about Daggerheart? Anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I mean, I will say the one thing I read about death. So we talked a little bit about death in the beginning. One of the things I read is that when your character's about to die, at least at this point, there's 3 options. Again, everything's subject to change, but this is kind of cool. And as someone who has a complete homebrew death system, I like this. So one of the options is they call it a blaze of glory, and so it grants you an automatic critical success, like right before death. Like I could just see your barbarian or whatever they have that's similar, running in and taking this blade, going out in the blaze of glory. But then there's also lose hope to heal. And so you can lose 1 hope slot permanently. So you have a max of 5 hope slots. You can lose 1 and regain 1 hit point. And so that is I still want to play this character.
Basically.
Yeah, exactly. It stabilizes you. So, and then there's roll hope and fear. And so you roll both. And if your hope is higher than your fear, you live. But if your fear is higher than your hope,
let the dice decide.
No, exactly. And so those are the 3 options. And I'm imagining this at my table. Death is such a big thing at my table, right? Like my in-person table, we always roll, all death saves are rolled in private. And if there's ever a tie, we roll that 1 roll publicly. And there's that big, anticipation. And I could just see, like, you're sitting there like, okay, your healer goes down. What are you going to do? Right? Like, because you have those 3 options. Are you going to risk it, let the dice decide? Or are you going to go out in a blaze of glory? Like, how? And I could just see, the anticipation and the story that comes from that too.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. The blaze of glory, the fact, and it's, it's like, was it an auto crit or is it just an automatic advantage?
Yeah, automatic critical success is what it says.
Okay, that's right.
Grants 1 automatic critical success. So it's that, like, you're trying to take down the enemy right before you die,
Yeah, but you do die. That's also part of it.
You do die. You die. I mean, you are dead.
Now they said
sacrifice your character for the party?
Right. And they said there is resurrection, but it's like you can only do it like once, maybe twice with some ability, but limiting it and making death more impactful, I think, is pretty awesome. So
yeah. Oh yeah. I think so too.
Awesome. Well, let's move on from that segment. And is there anything you've been able to work on besides the amazing graphics for this show?
Thank you.
In the recent past, or is it more looking towards the future?
So you mean in tabletop RPG wise, like any games we're running and stuff? Yeah. So I mentioned earlier about Crosshaven, how Crosshaven eventually came to an end, and what ended up happening with Crosshaven is, one, from a DM perspective, it was writing a brand new one shot every single week, and so it got taxing. But then it got to where I really did have about the same 5 players that were playing, and so I was like, hey, you 5 players that are playing almost every week, do you want to go into a long-term campaign? And they're like, absolutely. And so that is where the campaign we're in right now is actually kind of the product of Crosshaven. Same world, but it's set 55 years into the past. And so whereas my normal world, everything I'm playing right now is happening at a certain time period in my world, where they're playing right now is 55 years in the past. And that campaign is going really well. We are on about a month-long hiatus, and we've been having a blast with it. And I don't want to give out too much because, well, some of my players are in chat right now, and but there will be opportunities similar to how Crosshaven allowed more people to play. That was one of the things we decided on when we first began this campaign, is we wanted open to guest appearances. And so that is specifically written into the storyline, although we haven't gotten to that point just yet. So yeah, that's my online Friday night campaign. Actually, as soon as we finish this podcast, I'm going into D&D prep mode for this Friday session. And so that has been a lot of what we're doing. And then as for my in-person campaign, Reborn, who was the guy that joined me when we first started with Hearth and Hammer, he is running a small campaign. And as soon as we finish his up, which should be getting finished up in the next week or so, we'll be jumping back into my big campaign in person. So that's where my TTRPG stuff has been right now. I'm excited to test some of these other systems because I would like to see what it looks like to move into one of these other systems in more of a long form campaign. And that might be something I do with one of my slots that I have.
Maybe
just
pick
try to
one.
Pick one. Yeah, that's kind of what's like. I would like Daggerheart to be it, but 2024 is a while away.
We got time.
Yeah, we got time for that one. And not to mention, just from a content creation standpoint, I feel like it's going to be popular. And so doing an online long form Daggerheart campaign, I feel like we'll do well. It might not.
There's going to be a lot of people doing it.
There's going to be a lot of them. That's right. And so, I'm not sure what I'm going to do there. But as of right now, I'm running. I have the one Friday night game, and then I'll be having my in-person campaign starting back up in the next month or so.
Awesome.
So
well, as
you?
for
What's been going
myself, so Hearth and Hammer still going strong. Mm-hmm. We have a whole new party, as I mentioned earlier, except Austin actually came back. Yeah. So he is back with it. It is a completely new homebrewed world called Zenelia. The players were on about the 14th or 15th session, actually. Nice. And so they have gone through kind of their first intro adventure, and they are moving into kind of the wider world exploration at this point. And at the moment, it took them into... it took them kind of out of the small, dangerous area where they were into we are on the front lines of battle.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so it's exciting, and they were like, oh my goodness, like, because they were teleported to a fortress to try to initiate communications again with this fortress because there was threats of invasion, and they basically see an army setting up to siege this fortress. Okay. They had an encounter with a scouting group. One of them went down. It was pretty fantastic. Yeah. But then they have made communication with a scouting party from the fortress and have made it inside at the moment.
Okay, nice.
So they're there. But it's fun because, like, basically with this invasion, it's the introduction of like cannons and firearms to this that's cool. To this kind of high fantasy world. Yeah. For sure. But the invasion is happening, and this shade mist force. The shade mist is kind of the mysterious boogeyman entity, from somewhere far off. Yeah. Think Lord of the Rings, Mordor, right? Shade Mist is the Mordor, and just like forces are starting to come from unknown areas. And so, they're bringing with them these new dangerous weapons. And so it's pretty cool. I have put a lot of stuff into this universe that I've created. Some of it is inspired by other worlds and systems, but it's been a lot of fun, and the players are doing fantastic. I have a
Awesome.
mute halfling ranger, and
I love
they
it.
have made up signs that they do when they have conversation. They don't know ALS, so it's not like they're doing actual sign language, but they have made up
Right.
signs,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they're getting pretty good at it. The guy who does it, he's getting pretty good at it.
That's awesome.
He's also a Beastmaster Ranger, and we made a
The best.
table to roll for what kind of animal companion he got. And so we
Oh,
rolled, and
yeah.
he got a giant badger.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
Yeah.
I did a custom stat block for it for this world, so it's got a little bit.
Okay.
It's a little bit more fun. I did a little bit of a modification, so it's not boring.
Hmm. Nice.
So yeah, and then I've got others that have a couple custom backgrounds, and that has already played
Hmm.
out. We had a really heavy couple of RP sessions that we didn't have any. We had like 3 rolls the whole night, and it was just
Wow.
like so heavy RP,
Hmm.
and to the point where like I knew the background of one character, and I kind of pulled something on him that for that character made him very emotional.
Right.
Um, but the others didn't know why. And so it was a lot of fun. It was really fun. And the players are doing fantastic. So, yeah, if you want to check it out, it's Hearth and Hammer. You can
Hmm.
find us everywhere.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys know where to find this guy if you're watching the live stream or the VOD, but you definitely check out
Hmm.
DrHeals TTV.
Yeah. No, just
No,
just
just
it's twitch.tv/DrHeals.
yes, yes. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
thinking old school for a
You're
second.
good. Old school. Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
No, I mean, I'll give a quick recap about actually what's happening in the Friday night game too, because if anyone wants to jump in, I don't want you to feel like you missed too much. We're 5 or 6 sessions in, and essentially the party all comes out, and we have a very diverse party, and we have a dragonborn. A dragonborn. I think he's a paladin. I'm trying to remember. Or
it's
no,
been a
he's
month.
a
You're forgiven.
artificer. He's a dragonborn artificer. Never mind. Dragonborn artificer. And then we have I actually have a guy playing my very first homebrew race, which is a Silmatar, and it's sort of a
Nice.
an elf that has spent generations in the shadows. And so, anyway, we have a pretty diverse party, but they were actually mistaken for a criminal group, and basically hired as the person who hired them thought they were the criminal group to go retrieve the orb of everlasting, and so they're basically in the process of going to that at this very moment where they got in a fight with a couple of bugbear on a bridge, and they just destroyed the bridge. I had two characters go down making
Oh
death
no.
saves. It was quite well. So my Silmatar friend, he went down at the very beginning of the combat because he tries to keep his distance from the other ones, doesn't really trust them yet, and so he got back there all by himself against a lone bugbear, and yeah, it was a heck of a fight. And so right now, at this very moment where we left off, is they stayed the night. They found a cave. They found a nice cave to stay the night in, and during the night they heard footsteps, and then they heard that kind of running and sprinting back in the other direction, and they were able to kind of discern that the bugbear they killed, the 2 bugbears they killed, were with a bigger party that discovered their
Ooh,
bodies. And so where they're at right
nice.
now is they encountered this party of bugbears, and now they're running away. And the Silmatar has put the bugbear group in an orb of darkness, and they're trying to get away from the group. So that is literally
Awesome.
where they left off. And so as soon as we return, we'll see what happens.
That's exciting. That's really
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. Well, that is, I think, all we have on the agenda for this evening.
yeah, I think so.
I think most episodes will probably be shorter, but we had a lot of introduction. We had a lot of discussion about where we're going to go with the podcast in the future. But we are excited for this podcast. We're excited because we are both we're both family friendly. We're both Christians, and that comes through in a lot of the content we make, but not in an overt and overbearing manner, as some might consider it. But neither one of us are ever, we're always open to talk about it, have conversations. And so that's part of who we are. And we just wanted to be able to bring that to the TTRPG space, because there is not a lot of that in the tabletop gaming space. There is, in my opinion, a huge need for people to bring the light of Christ to board game, tabletop gaming,
absolutely,
just in general. So, so yeah, I mean, that's kind of why we're doing this. It's also why we are looking. We have some potential partnerships on the horizon, and so we'll definitely let people know about that. But for now, if you watch the live stream and you check out the VOD, you can find us at the RPG Rundown on Twitter /X, the social media platform.
Social media platform.
Yes. You can find myself on there as well at WhiteFoxSG. You can find Jeff.
Me. Yeah. Yep. So on x.com, I am DrHeals TTV on there.
That's where I was. That's where I got it.
Yeah. I just do so of DrHeals TTV. The name DrHeals is the only platform that my name is taken on.
It's the worst when you have to switch up your handles across platforms.
I know.
So
I know. That is the only platform that I don't have, just DrHeals. It's fine. I'm not bitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. If you have stuck around this long, thank you for joining us. Be sure to like or subscribe if you whatever channel you find this video on, or if you listening to the podcast, make sure you leave a comment or a review, and then also hit us up on social media. We'd love to talk with you, either on our personal channels or on the podcast social account, and we will engage with you there as we can. We look forward to doing this more often, and we'll see you next time.
All right. See you guys in the next one.